What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 14 top 18 quarterback rankings, trying to get your lineups right for the final push into the fantasy football playoffs. If you guys enjoy the video, smash that like button, subscribe. But let's just dive right into it here. We're going to start off in tier 1 with two quarterbacks. The first one is going to be Josh Allen going up against the Rams. He's really been on a tear as of late, 18 plus points in his last 7 games, and he has back-to-back games with 24 plus points. Believe he was the first quarterback ever to throw, catch, and rush for a touchdown. So that obviously led to a great game on, what was that, Sunday Night Football. Josh Allen, he's my quarterback one this week. Then also in tier 1, I have Joe Burrow going up against the Cowboys. This is a nice matchup. The Cowboys are top 5 in points per game allowed, and Joe Burrow's been on a tear. In his last 4 games, he has thrown for 15 total touchdowns. So this defense has struggled. The offense needs to put up points, and Joe Burrow has been doing that. Now, looking at tier 2, I only have one quarterback in this tier, and it's going to be Jalen Hurts going up against the Panthers. This is on paper a strong matchup. The Panthers are allowing the 6th most points per game to the quarterback position. The issue here for Jalen Hurts, and it's kind of a weird issue, but it's like their offense is so good and their run game is so good that they're not putting a ton on the shoulders of Jalen Hurts. The Eagles have the lowest pass attempts per game, and it's by at least a couple of attempts to like the next lowest team. So the passing volume just hasn't been there. Now he's still live to, have a few rushing touchdowns even on low passing volume, but I do think it, lowers his floor a little bit. Still a very, very strong play, but that low passing volume is what's going to keep him out of tier 1 for me. Now, moving into a much larger tier 3, we're going to start off with Baker Mayfield going up against the Raiders. Also a nice matchup here. The Raiders are top 7 in points per game allowed to the quarterback position, and Baker hasn't been all that great as of late. From weeks 1 through 8, he had one game where he scored under 18 points. In his last 3 games, he has scored under 18 in 2 out of 3 of them. I still think he can bounce back here. It's a nice matchup. He has Mike Evans back. Not saying he's going to replicate the production we saw weeks 1 through 8, but I still think he can be a nice mid-tier QB1 play rest of season. Then also in tier 3, I have Kyler Murray going up against the Seahawks. Now, Kyler's honestly been a little bit disappointing as of late. Only has over 16 points in one of his last 4 games, but I do think this is just a pretty congested tier. A lot of the guys in the mid to back end QB1 area on the season are separated by less than 1 point. You have a ton of dudes averaging around 17 plus points per game, between 17 and 18. So I still like Kyler's rushing upside. Not a terrible or great matchup here against the Seahawks. So he is my quarterback 5. Then I have Jordan Love going up against the Lions. In his healthy games, he is averaging 18.6 points per game. On paper, though, not a great matchup. The Lions are allowing the 8th fewest points per game to the quarterback position, but Jordan Love should be fine. I do expect this game to be fairly high scoring, has solid weapons, and like I said, when he has been healthy, he has been a very reliable fantasy quarterback. Sticking within that division, I have Sam Darnold going up against the Falcons. Nice matchup here against the Falcons. They are tied for the 7th most points per game allowed to the quarterback spot. Sam Darnold's been pretty consistent as of late, 19 plus points in each of his last 3 games, and has put up 18 plus in 5 of his last 6. At QB8, we have another guy who's really been rolling here. It is Tua going up against the Jets. In his last 3 games, he has put up 23 points in all 3 of them, and in that 3-game stretch, he has thrown for 970 yards and 9 touchdowns. When you look at Tua and how he's actually scoring his points, he needs to deliver really strong passing production because the rushing is just non-existent, but that's exactly what he has done over the last 3 weeks. He's protected the ball and obviously is racking up a ton of passing volume. And then my last tier 3 quarterback, it is going to be Patrick Mahomes. Definitely has turned it around as of late. In his last 6 games, he is averaging 20.1 points per game. Not a great matchup here against the Chargers, but I do think he's fine in this mid to back end QB1 range this week. Now moving into tier 4, going to start off with Jared Goff going up against the Packers. The Lions, as per usual, are very up there in their implied point total. They are number 2 this week. And we've actually seen Jared Goff's pass attempts go up a little bit. He's averaging 32.3 attempts per game in his last 4. Early on in the season, there was just not a ton of these, high volume passing games. Definitely limited his floor and his ceiling, but we started to see those pick up. I also think in this matchup here against the Packers should be fairly competitive. Would expect to see those attempts in like the 30s. Then we have Russell Wilson going up against the Browns. I slept on him last week, ended up having a monster week 13, 414 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Also, not the worst matchup here against the Browns. I think he's playable in like this fringe QB1 area. Then I have Justin Herbert going up against the Chiefs. Week 13 was Herbert's first game under 17 points since week 7. This is just a tough spot for Herbert. At this point in the season, his weapons are just really lacking. You have J.K. Dobbins on IR. The run game without Dobbins has already been bad. You go up against this Chiefs team that just shuts down opposing teams' run games. So I don't think he's going to have the support, from the running backs. Then you look at the weapons. Ladd McConkey's banged up with a knee injury. If he cannot play, you are just looking at an atrocious group of pass catchers and that running back room. Like right now, Quentin Johnston is like your number 2 target. Will Dissly thrown in there. Like if he does not have Ladd, it's going to be bad. I will say though, teams have kind of been able to take advantage of this Chiefs defense in back-to-back weeks. Bryce Young had a decent game. Aiden O'Connell out of nowhere threw for like 300 plus yards. So I could see Herbert having a great game, but just looking at his supporting cast, it's tough to get super excited about him at this point. And then the last guy in tier 4 is going to be Caleb Williams. Back-to-back really strong games, 26 fantasy points in both of them. Not overly scared of this Niners matchup. It's not great, but I think Caleb will be fine as like a fringe quarterback 1 play. Now moving into the 5th and final tier, I might be crazy for who I have here at quarterback 14 early on in the season. Thought there was no shot I'd ever be ranking this dude, in any of my videos. It is Will Levis going up against the Jaguars. Now, on paper, this is a fantastic matchup. They were allowing the most points per game to the quarterback position, and that wouldn't be enough to just like vault some random quarterback into the rankings. But Will Levis has actually been somewhat consistent as of late. He has put up 15 or more points in each of his last 4 games. So he's had like a baseline of safety. You add in that this is a really strong matchup. I don't think Will Levis is the craziest play this week. After Will Levis, I have another guy who can kind of be a little bit reckless. It is Jameis Winston going up against the Steelers. Now, this is not a good matchup, kind of the opposite of the Will Levis situation. The Steelers are actually allowing the fewest points per game to the quarterback position. However, as a starter, Jameis is averaging 21.4 points per game. So he's going to go out there. He's going to sling it. He might throw some interceptions like we saw in week 13, but he also has the potential to just rack up a ton of passing volume. Like you look at that Broncos defense, on paper, that should have been a tough matchup for Jameis. Still had a really nice day, from the fantasy perspective. So Jameis, think he, is fair here in the top 15. Then I have Matthew Stafford going up against the Bills. The next two, definitely have tough matchups. So for Stafford, the Bills are bottom 4 in points per game allowed, but Matthew Stafford has been very productive with his wide receivers healthy, 19.2 points per game since they both returned to the lineup. Then we have Brock Purdy going up against the Bears. Bears are bottom 2 in points per game allowed, and Brock is definitely coming off a brutal week 13, 2.2 fantasy points. CMC left with injury. It was in the snow. It was a trailing game script right away. It was not a great setup here for Brock Purdy. I think he'll be fine moving forward, but the weapons overall have definitely taken a hit. Ayuk, CMC out of the lineup, and with a bad matchup, he's more in like that mid-tier QB2 range for me. And then the final guy, Geno Smith going up against the Cardinals. This is kind of just where he is settled in. It's not a, great or terrible matchup, but he's the quarterback 16 in points per game. Hasn't had, an explosive game within his last 3. So not overly excited to play Geno, but if you're desperate, have a quarterback on bye, he could be a suitable fill-in. That's going to wrap it up for my top 18. Let me know your thoughts down below. Any questions? Would love to hear them. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.